to the Where the Climate Things Are podcast. Would you introduce yourself to those that are not familiar with you?
Hi, Addie. Yes, it's really great to be here. And I never know how to introduce myself because people who meet me and know what I've done in running expect that I'm like some crazy ultra athlete, like so many of the other people I know that you have on this podcast. And the truth is, I'm not that at all. I'm a klutz. Just ask my coach, or look at my knees, which have got like grazes and bruises all over them. But I run ridiculously long distances in the front lines of the water crisis to raise awareness of the urgency of the problem and try to get companies and governments and individuals to take action. And I do that by trying to close the gap between the stories of what we think is, in inverted commas, like out there versus what's in the boardrooms and the halls of power of government. And I think that it's too easy for excuses, not only excuses to not go for a run, we all know about that, but like too many excuses for governments and government officials or corporates and corporate decision makers not to do something because these water problems seem too far away. And I hope that by doing these crazy stunts and getting media and using the media to be able to close that gap in the stories and explain to the decision makers that this is a supply chain which impacts all of them all the time because it impacts all of their people all the time, and therefore acting on it is the smart, sensible, strategic thing to do.
That was great.
So I don't know if that tells you.
It's so weird hard to do an introduction.
I know, it's so funny because my background is in law and science and finance and all these other things. And I never would have imagined that at this very late stage of my life, because I'm quite old, I would be sitting here going, yes, I am a water advocate and ultrarunner. And that sounds really crazy and ridiculous.
No, it's awesome. And I want to ask you about getting from point A to point B, which we will. I want to first ask you, so this is a question I ask everyone that comes on this podcast is, and this might help us get to the point A to point B question. What was your aha moment on climate in general? And then we can drill down into water. Like, what was the aha moment for you around environment?
So I think I'll talk specifically about my aha moment for water, because I cut my teeth in climate change and I was running funds that were investing in projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And, I had my own investment fund. I lived in China for a while. I was working at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. So I had grown up, if you think about like growing up in your corporate life, through this whole evolution from the early days when people would say to me, what are you working on at the bank? Are you a teller? I had to explain it was the World Bank, didn't really have tellers. And then they would say, so what are you working on? I have to try to explain that I was working on carbon markets and climate change. And at that time, the only carbon markets were the trade in purchasing carbon, which is used in aluminium, or as you Americans say, aluminum. Manufacturing. And people couldn't understand the way you say it better. It was like this is an environmental challenge. And that
what year was this? Because carbon markets weren't. I feel like this was not so widespread at this point. Maybe
this was before the Kyoto Protocol was even ratified.
Wow,
this was like way back when all of this was even just starting. Yeah, no, don't say that. It makes me feel really, really old, like super old. It's okay.
By the way,
this morning I was like, I do feel old some days.
No, you said you were old, and I just made a face like, no.
Skating over that. So getting back to, yes. So what was my aha moment? So I had this whole background in climate change. And I think my very first aha moment, which is the thing that made me really stop and say, what am I doing here? Was actually through exposure at the World Economic Forum to this concept of water, not just as an environmental problem, but as a major commercial and economic risk for companies around the world. And it made me stop and think, I have divested literally billions of dollars. We've done billions of dollars of deals all over the world. And whilst we have looked at, especially when we're looking at, electricity and mining and things, we looked at the potential climate risk, but not once did we ever think about the water related risk of the investments that we were making. And I think when you stop and you realize, shoot, water goes into absolutely everything we use, we buy, and we consume every single day, whether it's the food we eat, the power we use, the homes that we live in, all of those things take water. So if we just think about like the smart outfit you're wearing today, awesome jumper, glasses, you've probably got an Apple phone in your pocket.
It
All of
right
those
here.
things, yeah, all of those things took water to make, right? And
Yeah.
if you want to quantify it, all of those things took as much water to make as all the water you drink before you're 40 years old, right? And you don't just own one outfit. You don't just eat one meal. And we don't just have a population that's stagnant. So the truth is that if you multiply just that little water footprint you've got on you today by all the things in your closet, the trail clothes, the running clothes, the road running clothes, the packs, the shirts, the jackets, even just like ordinary day-to-day stuff, and you multiply it by the number of people on the planet, you realize actually our water use is increasing at twice the rate of our population. And that wouldn't be a problem if the demand for water was the same as the supply, or that we had an unlimited supply. So I always think about it, and I think my heart moment at the forum was, okay, if this is a supply demand problem and the demand is increasing and the supply can't increase because of all the threats from pollution and climate change and all these other issues that are impacting our supplies of water, and water is this incredibly important cornerstone of our communities and our economies and our societies, where is this future going? And WRI has done a bunch of data on this, and they've estimated that the gap between demand and supply for water by 2030, like not very long from now, is going to be about 40%. So there will be a 40% gap between the demand and the supply. As an aside, it's one of the reasons why I really focus on running marathons. But anyway, so that was my aha moment of, shoot, this is a big problem, and why is no one doing anything about it? My second aha moment was probably something that was much less intellectual and much more visceral. And that was, I was standing on the bank of the Richtersveld, in the Richtersveld Desert on the banks of the Orange River. And the Orange River basically flows through and marks the border between Namibia and South Africa. And as we'd come down, I was in the middle of trying to run across 7 deserts on 7 continents in 7 weeks, like kind of as you do. I just flippantly say that. It sounds ridiculous.
We just need to pause and realize, but we'll get back to that. Okay. Wild.
Okay. Anyway.
Okay. So you're in the middle.
So I was in the middle, like we'd run, I think it was my 4th desert. I still had 3 more to go, and we're coming down. We've been running. It was really hot and dry and dusty. And I have a support vehicle just because we are literally in the middle of absolutely nowhere. It has to carry water, has to carry everything. So the support vehicle had gone down this kind of dip into where I knew that the river was. And as I came down over the dip, the guys were like, crossing their arms in front of me, like, we can't go. There's a block, you can't go across. And we came down, and there was the car on a barge stuck in the middle of the river, like literally lodged on some sand, and could not go across the river. It was like Turned out when we talked to the local communities that the river was at its lowest level ever. And when I said to them, is this expected, they all said no. There's been drought, but it's not been caused by drought, because we've seen this before. Like, we've seen drought levels before, and this is like unlike anything we've seen before. And they said to me, this is being caused because of massive over withdrawals of water from the river upstream to grow grapes. And those grapes are being shipped on trucks across bumpy roads through the desert to get exported to tables in Europe. And I just stood there on the banks of this river, and I thought, how many times have I looked at a bag of grapes and you get to the bottom and you're like, yeah, these ones are a bit soggy or a bit brown. I've never thought about where they've come from. And I've never thought about the consequences of my consumption habits or the choices that I've made. And the damage that I've been a part of making around the world is right here in front of me. And I felt at that point, I was like, this is unacceptable. I can't let this continue. And I thought my whole world shift. And I was like,
Wow.
this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I always thought at the end of my seventh desert, I was going to go back to being a lawyer or back to doing investments or back to being a banker or running my fund or whatever it was. I always thought like I'd pull my high heel shoes back out of the cupboard. But at that moment, I knew that my path had been like absolutely fundamentally altered and that this was what I was going to commit to do for the rest of my life. And I was going to solve this global water crisis. And I know people look at me and they go, oh, it's such a big problem. You can't say that. You can't say. And I'm like, well, if someone doesn't say it, who will? But if we don't actually start dreaming big, bold, audacious goals, if we don't actually start putting these things out there and saying we can do the hard things that are needed to get there, especially if we do it together, we'll never, ever make inroads into these big environmental challenges, whether it's climate change or water. And so a big part of my life over the last couple of years has been demonstrating the power of saying we can do these things that nobody expects that we can do. But when we go step by step, we can actually achieve them, especially if we build our tribes and our communities and our people around us to help us and support us to get there. And those tribes and communities aren't just people, they're companies and organizations and, groups of other people
Partners.
that can come along. Exactly. It's
Mm-hmm.
people who are committed to moving in the same direction and who say, yeah, we can do that too. And that's the
I love
power
that.
of like these big, crazy moments in time
Yeah.
and these big, crazy goals to be able to say
Yeah.
we can change the world if we only unite and start moving step by step in the right direction and the same direction.
Oh my gosh. I have goosebumps right now. Okay, so I have to go into this next question because you just said, you know, you were in finance and banking, and I know you also have a climate and environment background in all of that, but you're at the World Bank and you're attending World Economic Forum. You also have said you're not a runner necessarily, and yet you are a run like a non-runner who has come into this world of like you don't just run, you run deserts of time, you run full rivers, you've like what I don't what was the impetus of getting into running, and then how did that connect into advocacy, specifically water advocacy? So it sounds like the aha moment around water advocacy was what you just said, but like let's rewind a little bit. What brought you into running, and then as like sort of as a tool for advocacy?
Yeah. So when I realized firstly, when I kind of started to understand about water, I thought to myself, I think what we need to do is we need to change demand. We need to think about this smarter. We need to change demand for what companies are doing. Because
Mm-hmm.
if companies can see that their consumers care, then they'll change their behavior. So we started running kids education programs in China, which is the fastest growing consumer economy in the world. And it was amazing. We educated millions of kids. We ran innovation competitions, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of kids participated. It was phenomenal to see and witness this groundswell of appetite for doing things differently. And it was amazing. But all the time hanging over me, I had this like, by 2030, there's going to be a 40% gap. And I was like, we can't do this kid by kid. We need a dramatic intervention that's going to create systemic accelerated change. And I was sitting around with a couple of my beware of friends, a couple of my friends from the World Economic Forum. We'd been like literally listening to these conversations and having a debate. Mina, what's your pain point? My pain point is we need to solve this global water crisis. We've got a deadline because 2030 is coming
Yes.
fast.
Yeah.
And we realized that we needed to do something beyond just kids' education. We actually needed to do something that would grab media attention that we could leverage the media as a mouthpiece to start sharing information that would get onto the desks of the people making decisions much faster than trying to like shift a whole consumer patterns. So we said, what would happen if we actually went to the front lines and we demonstrated what's happening in inverted commas, as I said before, out there, and we brought those stories through the media onto the desks of the people making the decisions. Because our bet, which has paid off, but our bet at the time was that if we could, instead of creating this intellectual connection just by pitching numbers, we could create an empathetic and an emotional connection through storytelling and connecting real people in these supply chains to those decision makers, maybe those decisions would be different. And in actual fact, it's summed up best by an amazing Indigenous leader that I met when I was running across the Simpson Desert in Australia. Okay, and it's just like a crazy thing to say anyway. But anyway, this amazing Indigenous leader who said to
I
me,
already gotten used to it. Like you just say these
okay,
things
great,
and I'm like,
great,
okay,
okay,
yeah,
great, okay, great.
yeah.
So we can just like move on. Okay. So this Indigenous leader said to me, Mina, decisions would be better if leaders could understand that things are different on the land. And he's absolutely right. And that then forms the cornerstone of this crazy idea to go to the front lines of the water crisis. But we realized quickly, if I just went there and like we didn't have some kind of stunt or some hook to capture the media, then they wouldn't pay attention. Oh, hey, like CNN, I'm just going to go and run, like
Right.
going to go and visit this. Like, who cares?
Yeah, right.
But if I said I'm going to do something really stupid, like I'm going to run across 7 deserts on 7 continents in 7 weeks, or hey, I'm going to run 100 marathons in 100 days, or, you know, like I'm going to run 200 marathons in a year, or some of the other crazy things that I've done. It's all about finding enough of a physical hook that they pick up the phone and they ask me the one question I need them to ask. I only need one question, and that's why. Right? Because the why is very clearly I'm not a runner. Like, it's not because I like running. I've been very clear. I find running really hard. I'm not like your
Yeah.
like pro athletes that you have and that you've talked to, Addie. I'm not like that. I am always at the back. I am slow. I'm a plodder. I break down. I'm old. I find running really, really hard. And I have to be
Yeah.
incredibly disciplined to get out there every single day and do these miles. And
That makes it all the
you know,
more
as I
impressive,
said,
I just have to say. Like, seriously, I mean, to have it's unbelievable. I mean, it's funny because it's like, I'm like, you are definitely a runner and you are definitely very skilled and you excel at running. But I hear what you're saying in the like, the ways in which our running society sort of counts metrics and whatever. It's different.
I don't I don't excel at running. I excel at grit and perseverance and absolute sheer determination. That is
Wow.
my skill set.
Yeah.
And I apply it to running because running is the tool that enables me to make the change that I want, which is to solve our water crisis. So as soon as that tool becomes redundant, or I find a better, sharper tool in my toolkit, and if anyone's got any ideas, I'm all in. I just asked me. Yeah. As soon as I find that tool, I'm like, great. Here is the couch, and here is me sitting on it. And I think, you know, that's for me, that's like a big differentiator because the truth is, when people are like, "Oh, can I come for a run with you?" I say, yeah, that'd be great. In my heart, I'm like, shoot, oh no, we're not going to be able to. And I always call my coach. I'm like, Coop, I'm not going to be able to keep up. I'm not going to be able to do this. It's going to be too hard. I'm not a runner, blah, 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 blah. You know, because that's the truth. The truth
Yeah.
is I get by on grit and determination. And that's also, Addie got me in bad places as well as good
Hmm.
places.
I have to ask, did you run even recreationally before you had this running aha moment, if you will? Like when you said, well, that was so interesting when you said, you know, if I called CNN and said, I'm just going to the front lines, maybe they would be like, cool, have fun, right? No one would pick up. But when you say the hook with what you're doing and the why, then they pick up the phone. And so, but did you even, like, were you even a recreational, like, did you run for fun? I don't know. Were you a runner in that way beforehand? Or did you really kind of come at, because it's unbelievable to hear that you might have come at this with like truly a strategic advocacy angle only?
I came at this from a purely strategic advocacy angle, but it happened a bit by accident.
Okay.
My very first introduction to running was because I was at university and I hurt my back in a really bad accident. And the doctor told me I wouldn't ever be able to run again. I was like, I never ran before. Huh? So all my friends were like, yeah, great, great excuse to sit on the couch and eat
Yeah.
pizza. And I just went,
Yeah.
wait, you have these moments in life when you're at a turning point and, who you are is determined by how you approach and how you respond to that moment. And you can go back through life and you can work out where they are. And you can say, if I had sliding doors moments, whatever you want to call them, I could choose this or I could choose that. And I chose at that point, like something in my head was like, I'm not going to let some old dude in a white coat tell me what I'm going to do with my life, what I can and can't do. No way. Like, who are they? Only I should be able to determine and decide what I do with my future. And so I started swimming. Funny because I thought I was a swimmer. So, like, everybody at university is coming up to me going, I hear you're a swimmer. I'm like, yeah, I'm a swimmer. And one of my friends came up and was like, oh, we swim. I'm in the triathlon club. We swim 5 a.m. in the morning. I'm like, 5 a.m. Who's out at 5 a.m. when they're not coming home from the pub or not coming, like, turning up at home 5 a.m.? Are you kidding me? But I was too proud. And I was like, yeah, sure. I can come swimming with you at 5 o'clock. She goes, right, tomorrow morning. I'm like, oh, what have I done? What have I done? This is a bit of a story of my life. Okay, so I'm like, okay, fine, sure. I turn up. Okay, I swim 2 laps. 2 laps. It's like a 25-meter pool. I swim 50 meters. They swim 10K. I am like, they are swimming,
10K?
swimming, swimming. I probably wasn't. It might have been 4. It felt like 100,000
Sure,
kilometers
sure, sure,
further than
sure,
I could
sure.
swim.
Yeah.
But I suddenly looked around and I was like, well, these people are friendly and they're encouraging
Mm.
me and
Mm.
it's fun and there's a community and sure, I can't be like them, but they don't seem to care. They're just like happy that I'm here. So cool. Maybe I'll come again. And over a period of time, I started swimming more. We started riding a bike. Mine was a clunky old bike. I could ride to the milk bar. They rode 140 kilometers all the way down the coast around the beach. I'm like riding 5K. And one of them said to me one time, Mina, you came here because you said you don't want to be a cripple. And what better way to prove to yourself that you're never going to be not something than
Mm.
by doing the Ironman? And I was like, what's the Ironman? Like, it's
You're like, wait, what's
3.8
that?
kilometer swim and a 180 kilometers bike and a 42K run. I was like, sure.
Oh.
Okay, Eddie, I do not know what possesses me in these moments, but I'm like, maybe I can't say no. I don't know. And I was like, sure. So 9 months later, not knowing the first thing about what I was doing, I finished. I finished the Ironman. I walked most of the run. I walked half the bike because my bike had a problem. I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't know how to fix it.
Oh.
They're like, even the mechanics, like, we can't help you. We're not supposed to fix your bike for you. You're supposed to know how to fix it. I'm like,
And you're like, what do you mean? I don't even know what this race
I
is.
don't know. I don't know what this race is.
Oh my
Anyway,
gosh.
so I was like the second last or third last person or something to finish the race. The point is, as I came up that finishing line, and all these people were young as dark, obviously, because I was like at the end,
Yeah.
just before the cutoff,
Yeah.
and all these people shouting and screaming and yelling. And I realized that the only person that had got me through to that finishing line was me. The only person that got up, did that training, persevered through the hardships was me. That I took step by step. I fed myself, I watered myself, I got myself across that finishing line. And it was a real moment of, it's incredible what we can achieve when we truly put our minds to it. Someone said to me a long time ago, change is made by people united by purpose, by passion, and by perseverance. And I thought at that one moment in time, surrounded by all those people at that finishing line, it was an absolute lesson in the incredible things that we can get our body to do and our
Yeah.
mind to do when we have that purpose, that passion, and that perseverance. So I think, like, I had known, like, that was my first thing of, you set a big goal, you don't think you can achieve it, but it's amazing what you can do. And I think that that was a lesson that I'd kind of put away in the back of my mind. And so when we did start talking about, well, we could go to the front lines, and I was like, yeah, let's go there. They're like, no,
Yeah.
that's not enough. We need to make a stunt. And the truth is that when we were sitting there having this conversation, I had just run the Marathon de Sable.
Yeah.
And I ran
Oh,
it
yes.
by accident, because a friend of mine, I was working on water and I was doing our kids education program, and a friend of mine called me up and said, I'm going to enter the Marathon de Sable. Why don't you do it? It'd be a great way to show what a world is like without water. And I was like, I'm never going to do that. And he said, if you change your mind, call me and I'll support you to do it. So I was like, hang up the phone. I was literally in the corridor outside our little office in China, walked back along the corridor, and before I got to the door of our office, I called him back and I said, okay, let's do it. And again, I had no idea. Like, I turned up, my pack was like 12.5 kilos. Everybody else's pack was like, 7 to 8. And
Yeah.
I sat there in my tent. I was in the China tent, and, I was very, very avidly doing this for the kids of China. So I had a big Chinese flag, and I had I was like adamant that this was supporting the kids of China. And they sat there and they're like, okay, chuck out, chuck out, chuck out, chuck out. So by the time I've started with 10 kilo pack instead
Yeah.
of 12, but I still, Addie, I had no clue. And over the
Gosh.
period of the race, I got more and more damaged, more and more broken down. And all that happened at the end of each day was that, I don't know anybody who's listening who's done the Marathon Saddle, especially in the early days, they had this system of telegrams and things that you would get. And at the end
Oh,
of each
yes.
day, everybody else, they'd come around the tents and they'd deliver the telegrams. At the end of each day, people would get one or two, and I would get hundreds of telegrams. And because they're from China and the system didn't recognize the Chinese characters, they were like little boxes. They had like all these blank messages from these kids in China who were just basically saying, Jiao, like it literally means add oil, but it means like go, Mina. And they were like,
Wow.
Jayo, Jayo, like keep going, keep going. When I got back to China and I met with the teachers and the communities of the people whose voices and messages I'd taken with me, and I sat in those boardrooms, those teachers crying, the government officials crying, because they could not believe what I had done and what I had put myself through to demonstrate to these kids in China what was possible. And I thought to myself, I guess was the second thing I learned, which is sometimes we need to show the power of what's possible to
Mhm.
demonstrate to people that it's not impossible. And I think
Wow.
for me, that moment when I talked about it with these guys, and when we were talking about we need to go to the front lines of the crisis, and they turned around and they said, well, what was it like to go and do the Marathon Sub? I was like, well, it's a week. We're talking about like 7 weeks. Like, no, I broke myself to do that one. I'm not going to do that again. I don't even know if I can do it. And all of them turned around and said, you're the one that says you can do the impossible. So get out there and do it. And don't just do it in one desert, do it in all these, like one desert on every continent, because you need to show that this is a global problem requiring global solutions. We
Yeah.
think water is entirely local, but the truth is that there are so many commonalities and so many ways in which we can address it as a global community. We need to think of it as being one world and one water. So we came up with this crazy idea that I would actually go and run at the front lines of this crisis again. Had no clue, no clue, no clue. But this time I knew I needed to surround myself with people who did. So I built my tribe,
Yes.
and I
Yeah.
built made sure I had physios and podiatrists, and came back from the last expedition, the first, when I was doing things when I ran and did marathon sub, my feet, I literally, the whole of my foot peeled off to the point where my physio, before I even knew what a podiatrist was, right, my physio yells out, and I was in Hong Kong, yells out across the whole of their clinic, opens the door, yells out, going, Brock, you've got to come in here and see this. You've got to see these feet. They're disgusting. I'm like, Justin, really? He's like, you have no idea. These are really bad. I've never seen feet so bad. Yeah.
Oh
So
my God.
I learned, okay,
Yeah.
feet, you don't have to accept. People say to me, oh, how do you not get blisters? I'm like, I've got a tribe of people. I get help. I don't know how to
Oh
stop a
yeah.
blister, but I know
Yeah,
people that know how
but
to
you
stop blisters. And
right.
first thing is like making sure you've got good footwear and making sure you've got the right footwear, not,
Yeah.
shoes that fall apart when you're out running. That's happened to me. Or, you're not
Yeah.
having, not wearing the right shoes. Like also me.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
basically all the dumb stuff, the rookie errors that you can make when you get into a new sport. Yeah, that's me. But I've learned you've got to be vulnerable. You've got to be prepared to say, I don't know. And you've got to be prepared to know that you've got this tribe of people around you, whether it's the people at the swimming pool that first day I went swimming, whether it's the people around me in the clinic that day in Hong Kong, or whether it's the people like out there in the field when you're like trying to look at some like water solution and you you don't understand how it works. Those people, you've got to be prepared to say, hey, you know what? I don't know. I don't know how this works. Please explain it to me because all I want
Yeah.
to do is know. And I
Right.
have this insatiable curiosity to learn and understand everything on the planet. So it can be kind of
That is
annoying,
clear.
but it has,
That's
but I've also
amazing.
learned that's also good because you know what? You're probably not the only one who doesn't know this. So when you
Yeah.
say, I don't know, it opens the door for everybody else. And that's one of the big things I learned
Absolutely.
when I tried to run 100 marathons in 100 days. I broke my leg. I didn't make it. One of the first things that I learned was sometimes you need to open a door to make space for other people to come into.
Yeah. And that's so important in a space like running broadly. Trail running, I think, definitely has that more specifically.
I don't know
There's
because I'm
a,
too scared to go and race.
well, I mean, but that's alone. Like, that's exactly that says a lot, right? Because you're such a, I know you said you don't excel, but you're such an accomplished advocate through running. I'm trying to choose my words carefully because I know you're like going to be like, no, no, this, but I like you are so like it's what's so funny to me. Actually, this segues nicely. Like I heard about you. I said to you earlier. I'm very like immersed in the trail space, sometimes for better or for worse. And I actually though heard about you through the water team at WWF. So I heard about you from Alexis and Rylan and like the guys at WWF. Yes. And they said, well, oh, you're into ultra running. Like, do you know Mina? And I said, who is this? Like, I have to know everything about this person immediately. This is so cool. She runs what? Like, she does what? Whoa, whoa, whoa. And it was wild too, because I feel, as I've shared, sometimes like I live, the double life of like my sort of outdoor passions and then the day-to-day climate work, and hearing from two people on a work call about an ultra runner, I was like, whoa, 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 hold up. So what I'm getting to is I'm curious at what point the Thirst Foundation sort of formed, or like when your work really shifted full time into, I mean, obviously like taking on these running endeavors is very full time, but when did it start to crystallize into Thirst? How did that come to be? And then what is the connection with your foundation to the events that you do, or the undertakings that you do, I should say?
Yeah, so we started first when I had that like aha moment at the World Economic Forum. That was when we started Thirst. It started as
Okay.
kind of like this initiative on the side while I was still doing my day job. Hello, Pot. My name is Kettle. And so yeah, that was when we started. And the more I got involved in water and the more I realized that, like, it was really, as we talked about, this major systemic global crisis, and it wasn't being talked about, that there was this sense of, I think about it as water blindness amongst key
Mm,
decision makers, that they don't understand the nature, extent of the problem. And even when they do understand, they don't understand how urgent it is, and they don't understand how it's impacting them. And my first instinct was, as always, like, I'm the dumb one in the room. And then the more I realized and the more research I did, and the more I realized that it's not only urgent and important and impacting economies and societies, but there is this water blindness, and I'm not the only dumb one in the room, right? There is
yeah.
water blindness that's absolutely pervasive, and for a lot of different reasons. And anyone who's listening to this and wants more information about how and why and, all the kind of ins and outs of this, I'm very, very happy to talk about it because it's a slightly complicated, I hate that word, but anyway, it is slightly
Mm-hmm.
complicated systemic mechanism that's like, it's a way that we've set up our companies and our infrastructure and the ways that we're managing water that's created this kind of disincentivization for water to be anywhere on the agenda at the level of
Yeah.
priority it should be.
Hmm.
Okay, so we set up Thirst, and first thing we did was the kids education program, which we've spoken about, and then it was like this sense of we need to do something bigger. And the more we got involved in these, we need to do bigger. You know, one of my philosophies is go big or go home, right? If we're going to solve
Yeah.
this problem, we need to really solve this problem, be all in to make it happen. And so we started running these campaigns. And when I came back from running across these deserts and I knew this is what I was going to do, I gave up, like, by that stage, I'd given up all my interest in my investment fund that I'd been doing with my business partner, and I was all in on Thirst. But I think the other thing that I learned very quickly by doing these crazy, I've got to stop calling them crazy. They're just like, I don't know what to call them. I need to like find a label of like how ridiculous, and anyway, these things,
Outlandish. Yeah.
these these expeditions,
The expeditions. There you
um,
go.
these expeditions, the the more I realized that one of the biggest challenges in water is that we have a completely fragmented and siloed community where the incentive to get money has meant that NGOs and other organizations pitch their solution as the answer instead of being part of a much more comprehensive mechanism or set of answers to a much more complicated problem. And so I realized I didn't want to be another organization like that. I wanted to do things differently. And I have a real passion for bringing people together, being focused on an outcome that's going to benefit everybody. And so we created this idea in the lead up to the first UN conference on water in 50 years that we would run a marathon for every country and territory around the world. So the idea was that we would run 200 marathons in 32 different countries because, of course, we still had COVID, so borders are still shut and all of that.
Okay.
But that we would use that to mobilize communities around the world. And, there's a whole backstory for this because when we decided that we were going to run 200 marathons, I was in a wheelchair. I was broken. I had just tried to run 100 marathons in 100 days. I had failed dismally.
Yeah.
I had got to
Wait.
marathon.
Sorry, I have to stop you. Didn't you
Yeah,
run 63? You got through
62.
60-ish.
I did
62?
62.
Okay.
Yeah, I got to 62
I would
very
say that's not
badly.
failing dismally, but I
It was
understand that what happened to your body was serious. I get that. I
yeah,
just have to give you
yeah. So
flowers
yeah,
while you're
it
here.
started great. It started really great. We had this idea that I would run 100 marathons in 100 days. I wanted to show what it meant to be 100% committed to something.
Yeah.
And it started at the New York City Marathon. Everybody else is excited. They're talking about, like, I think my first moment of what have I done was standing on the starting line, crying my eyes out. Everybody else is like, "You okay?" I'm like, "Yes." They're all talking about like how they're going to celebrate at the end of the day. All I'm
Sit on
thinking
the
about
couch
is
for the next few weeks. Yeah.
I'm just thinking I've got to recover and run a marathon tomorrow. And just the while there's helicopters whirring overhead and you've got like all these lycra clad runners all around you, just like this moment of, well, I can't believe I'm going to actually do this. And it was amazing. I can't even begin to tell you, Addie, you're a producer, you understand storytelling, but to just be on the front lines of this crisis, to be in places like the Aral Sea, where shipping boats lie stranded in the desert stands because they have used so much of the water to produce things like cotton and rice, and where you can meet the fishermen who will tell you, that is my boat. 30 years ago, I used to sail across this ocean that is now desert amongst these boats that you are running around, and this is literally like a bath plug being pulled out, and the whole of that enormous fourth biggest inland ocean in the world has gone. Or places like Beaufort West, where we got in the back of these like big flatbed trucks handing out bottles of water to kids who stayed home from school because there was no water in their communities, and they knew that if they weren't there when the water got delivered, there'd be no water that day. The town had literally run dry. Or like farmers that I met, like Christian, this farmer I met who told me, Mina, what hope do I have? To pray for rain or to leave my farm? The kid is like in his early 20s. He's inheriting a farm with no water. This is like, these things are messed up. So you can see when you're kind of like out there, the enormity of this thing, which actually also makes the enormity of what the physical nature of what I'm trying to do much, in some ways, more bearable, but in
Yeah.
some ways bearable to a bad degree, because what happened is in the background of all of these stories and these incredible people that I was meeting, I was like, I've got to go further, I've got to go further. I was having a lot of pain in my leg. It actually started the days when we were running across the RLC, just kept on going. That was in the early 20s of the marathons, kept going through the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And by the time I got to marathon 62, I'd gone from running. Well, my idea of running is like not really
Yeah.
running,
Yeah.
not like you
Yeah.
guys run. Like,
No,
anyway, it's
no.
like kind of trotting, very slow
Yeah.
trotting.
Oh, I love
Um,
a good trot. Don't
yeah,
worry.
well,
Same.
yeah, okay. So anyway, so
ACC, there were not many running steps for me. Let's just say that. It was a
okay,
big
makes me
hiking
feel
race.
better.
Okay? I'm with you. Yeah, yeah. I think I was
Okay,
like, let me not give you the wrong perception. But okay.
okay,
So
okay, I feel better.
62 or
Okay, so I did 62.
63.
So I've gone
Yeah.
from running. No, 62. So I'd gone from running to walking, and I was hobbling using my sticks, like those walking sticks, not
Yeah,
meant
yeah,
to
yeah.
really
Yeah.
bear a lot of weight.
Yeah.
They're carrying all my
Sure.
weight. And the team
Oh,
at the end of 62 had to lift me into the car. And they said to me, tomorrow morning, if you can't walk across, by this stage, we're not staying in tents. So we normally stay in tents. It's like a full on expedition. But
yeah.
I couldn't get on and off the ground anymore because I was in so much pain. So we had to stay at Airbnb, and they cleared out the room and they said, if you can't walk across this room unaided, you're going to the hospital. So of course, I mean, I couldn't walk. Like I literally could not walk without sticks or without holding onto something. So
Oh my
off we go to the
gosh.
hospital. They opened, it was a Saturday, they opened the radiology, they did a scan, and the team just looked at me. I saw their faces and they're like, you in pain? I'm like, yes, a lot of pain. It turned out that I had a 15 centimeter fracture in my femur. The fracture was so bad that if I tripped, if I hit my leg, if I twisted it, if I did anything, my whole leg would
Would
break
have.
because there was a literal, like a tiny fragment of bone holding the whole thing together. So I cannot even, Eddie, I cannot even begin to describe to you how I felt because I didn't actually like the pain, the whatever. Like I was like immune to that because I was so obsessed about
Yeah.
this passion and this purpose that I'd set for myself. And I sat in that wheelchair and I felt my whole world just collapse around me, like properly darkness and tears and sobbing and lack of comprehension and lack of willingness to even to understand that I couldn't go out there. Like this thing in my head was like, just get out there and do this. You said you were going to do it. You've made this commitment. There's all these people. There's this crisis. You've got to go out there. You've got to solve it. And one of my mentors came to see me at the hospital, also South African, because we were in Cape Town. And he sat me down and he said to me, Mina, don't let your purpose be confused with your goal. Your goal is to run 100 marathons, but your purpose is to solve this global water crisis. You need to remember your purpose, not your goal. And it took me a long time after that to really recover and to think about it that deeply. But those words have stayed with me forever.
Yeah.
And I think it didn't make me feel better. What actually happened was that my team came in and they said, like, these are a team of like amazing humans, but have no background in water. And they came in and they said to me, Mina, what we've seen over all these days is that our planet is heading for disaster. So what we've decided to do is to demonstrate to the world that this is not your problem, it's our problem too. So today we're going to go out and we're going to run your marathon for you. Day
Oh,
63, they went out and ran a marathon. And they took a social video and
whoa.
they said, we're running for Mina because she can't run anymore. We're running for a problem that's not hers, that's ours, and that's yours. And we're asking everyone to step up and tell us your water story and run. And day 64, when we turned up, we wrote on social media, we're going to come, we're going to run it. When I say they, because I was in a
Yeah.
wheelchair,
Yeah.
they were going to run. People turned up. And day 65, people around the world started showing up and running and running and running. And by the time we reached marathon 100, more and more people had joined this movement and sharing their stories and running. So we didn't run 100 marathons, we ran like thousands of marathons
Oh
right
my
across the
gosh.
world. And
Wow.
that moment was a real lesson in, as I said before, opening a door and providing an opportunity for others to share their stories and join together to build this, what has now become the biggest global grassroots movement on water in history. Because like
Wow.
every sane person would imagine, sitting in that like wheelchair at the end of that run, by that stage, I think it was on like, crutches, hobbling around, literally like unable to do anything. By the time we got to that day 100, it was a real kind of lesson in the momentum that we can create when we set these big, bold, audacious goals, about like demonstrating the power of what's possible, and about providing an opportunity for other people to, for people to come along and share their own stories and become part of this. So it's not about me running anymore. This is a story about thousands of people joining together around the world, not only to share their stories, but to come together as this amazing community. And over time, we built the biggest global grassroots movement on water in history. So, from instead of like 100 marathons, sitting in that wheelchair, doing the same thing that normal people would do, going, I can run 200. I know I couldn't run 100, but I'm pretty sure I can run 200.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
and then saying like, we need to find ways through this. We need to be prepared to confront the fact that the impossible is possible. We need to be prepared to do the hard things that are needed to get there. And like that's, for me, that was running the 200 marathons. It's going to be the next big expedition we're going to do, and however many more we're going to need to do until this problem is solved. But it's also about like how we can apply those lessons to inspiring CEOs and government officials to step up and take action on water. Because one of the
yeah.
most common responses I get is, oh, it's hard. It's very hard, Mina. What you're saying, I understand the problem, but what you're saying is very hard. And it is a
Mm,
very powerful thing to be able to stand in front of them and look them in the eye and say, you're telling me that what you're trying to do here is too hard. You're telling me that. And instantly what
wow.
happens is there's an about face and like, yeah, maybe it's not too hard. Maybe these are all excuses. So I say like hashtag no excuses, right? Hashtag we
Yeah.
can do big things. Like we can think outside the box. We can come together. We can do these incredibly big, bold, audacious things, especially if we come together and do it as a community.
Wow. Oh, I'm smiling so much right now because I feel like that is the kind of hopeful, action-oriented sentiment that I feel like I'm not seeing right now as much. And we talked about, like, I am in the US right now. And I feel like in the US it feels dark. And hearing you talk about this, feel like that was, I have two more questions for you, and this was the second to last, is what is giving you hope these days? And I feel like, or what are you excited about next? And you can take that however you want to, because I know some of the things maybe we can't talk about right now yet. But I just appreciate that hopeful energy, because I it feels hard right now here, and in our climate dialogue that I'm having. And I just appreciate when you said that, like, we can do hard things. Look at me and tell me that we can't do hard things. What's giving
Exactly.
you hope right now?
So the thing that gives me the greatest hope is the power of this community that we've been building, and the power of every single individual in it. Because I have a philosophy. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. Every single one of us, is capable of greatness. And I see that every single day amongst the community of people that step up to make a difference or share their story or do something on water. These people, a lot of the people in our community have nothing, but in their heart, they have everything they need to make a difference. And I think that's what we often forget when we lose hope. And, I think hope, we talk about hope as if it's a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. What's inside of us and how we use it, how we leverage it, how we build it, and how we strengthen it, that's a strategy. And I think it's easy to look for positivity outside, the real positivity we have to find is inside, because that's called resilience. And that means that no matter what life gives us, no matter what obstacles we confront, either because of the things that are going on in the politics through which we have no control over, or the other things that happen to us, and we all have bad stuff that happens. I've glossed over a lot of the terrible, terrible moments that I had mentally, physically, psychologically, bad places that I've been to. But in my heart, I've always been able to return to that little flicker of light. And sometimes that light is very dim. And sometimes that little light inside needs other people to fan it. That is the power of our tribe, of our community, of having people around us that believe in us even when we don't, whether it's family, whether it's friends, or whether it's just writing in a diary every day so you remind yourself of the power of what you can achieve, and you use that to flame that, to fire up that little flame. Like that's where we find this thing that we call hope, but I call resilience, grit, determination, and that ultimately is the power of our purpose. And that is what I see in people across the planet. And that is something I think you can't extinguish. You can't extinguish by leadership. You can't extinguish by changes in policy, or changes in government, changes in anything, because that light is the light that is within each one of us. And it's up to us to find that, to find the purpose, and to continue to fan it into something more positive that creates the engine and the power for us to make change.
Thank you, Mina. I think I really needed to hear that. And thank you for all the work that you do around the world. I do feel like we could talk actually for like quite a few more hours, but I am going to wrap with one more question, and then we will talk more because we have lots to talk about offline. So I ask everyone this to wrap. What is your favorite climate solution that is not your own? So in this case, it might not be running many, 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 many miles for water advocacy, but take that as you will. What's a climate solution that you're really excited about in the world?
So I think that the climate solution that I'm most excited about is going to continue this theme of the power of the individual. Because, I love, like, there have been a bunch of things that people have said to me along these expeditions, and I've shared some of them with you. But one of the other things at the end of one of my runs, someone wrote to me and they said, Mina, individually you can make an impact, but when we work together, we truly can change the world. And I firmly believe in the power of every one of us to step up and do something. So I think that the climate solution that I'm most excited about, not because of necessarily the solution itself, but because of the sheer ingenuity, grit, and resilience that went into doing it, is from a guy called Hugo. So Hugo lives on the cliff tops of the Atacama Desert, in a place where they literally have no rain. Like some of the kids that have grown up there have never seen it rain. And he wanted to grow vegetables and fish. And he'd read in a magazine about this idea of capturing the fog that would rise off the ocean and drift up.
Yeah.
So he got fishing nets, and he erected these massive fishing nets on sticks. And those fishing nets capture the fog. So Hugo's official title is a fog catcher. He captures all of the fog that's coming off the ocean. It gets captured into these nets, drips down, and he has managed to not only have enough water to drink, but also to put into these massive fish ponds to grow tomatoes and vegetables and all kinds of things. And I'm like, it's not the most ingenious, like the most technologically advanced solution. I could have given you so many examples of drones and sensors and all kinds of things. But the truth is that the vast majority of the impact that we can create is in our own hands and in our own minds and in our own hearts. And I think that for me, Hugo is a prime example of saying, you know what? Here's an opportunity for me to do something, for me to say, I can do this. Like, I think I can, I will. 6 words that were written underneath a massage table when I used to, like, when I got a couple of massages from a guy that actually used to message Kathy Freeman, and she had etched this underneath she's one of Australia's best sprinters,
Yeah.
and she had put these 6 words under the massage table. So every single time she got a massage, she would
Wow.
see these 6 words: I think, I can, I will. Right.
Wow.
And, Hugo is an example of the power that every one of us has to say, I think I can do this. I know I can do this. Now I will do it. And I think that for me, that's the most ingenious climate solution, because that solution is in the hands of every single one of us, whether
Yeah.
we're a government official, whether we are the head of a company, or whether we're just managing our own homes or our own lives. I think I can, I will make an impact.
Mina, thank you so much for all of this. I I'm smiling so much. I loved this conversation. And again, I feel like we have many more hours to talk through, many more ideas. But thank you for your time. And good morning to you in Australia. I should have said where you were calling from. But gosh, yeah, I'm so excited. I feel like this is the beginning of a fun collaboration between the both
Be
of
careful,
us.
Addie. You're going to be running a lot of miles over the next couple of years in some pretty
I,
crazy places.
Sign me up. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Addie.